How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Adrock is back with another Freelancer breakdown, this time featuring Nev. Is that how you pronounce the :3? Nev is a mid-range firepower capable of putting out really consistent good damage. She can also zone really well and is a great chaser. But before I go more in depth on that, let's go check out her abilities and modifications. Nev's first ability is Catlas. It's a blast phase, 0 cooldown ability, which throws out an energy disc, dealing direct damage to enemies. When the disc returns to you on your next turn, any enemy it passes through takes indirect damage. The returning disc ignores walls and cover. You'll gain 4 energy per enemy hit, outgoing or returning. Modifications include Ouch, which deals additional damage to targets that are hit by the return. Inertia. If no one is hit by the return, the next disc deals additional damage. Frisky. You'll gain additional energy per enemy hit. And Kitten Mittens, which grants you shields per target hit. Nev's second ability is Ambigify. It's a blast phase, 4-turn cooldown, free action. You empower a returning Catlas, which increases the size and its damage, and slows any enemy it passes through. You gain 4 energy on use. Modifications include Fat Cat, which gains you shield per enemy hit. Cat and Mouse, which will reduce the cooldown if no enemies are hit. Collar, which will root enemies, but decreases damage. And Hula Hoopa. Any ally or yourself the disc travels over are energized for the next turn. Nev's third ability is Mousetrap. It's a prep phase, 4-turn cooldown ability. You throw out a Seeking Catlas that reveals the first target hit. During the next decision mode, the secret disc will lock onto the target's current space and travel there during the blast phase, dealing direct damage to all enemies on the way. It also ignores cover. You gain 4 energy plus additional 6 energy per enemy damaged. Modifications include Stalker, which slows all units hit until the end of the turn. Sharp Claws, which increases the damage per square the disc travels. Off the Leash, which will reduce the cooldown if no enemies are damaged. And Feline Good, which deals additional energy on use. Nev's fourth ability is Acrocat. It's a dash phase, 5-turn cooldown ability which throws out a Catlas and you dash to a location. You can then move after dashing. You gain 4 energy per enemy hit, either outgoing or returning. Modifications include Catwalk, gives you haste until the end of the turn. Disc Fever, which increases the damage of returning discs. Big Cat, which reduces the cooldown of Ambigify if used on the same turn. And Hot Tin Roof, which increases the dash range but you can no longer move after dashing. Nev's fifth ability and ultimate is Cataclysm. It's a blast phase, no cooldown ability, provided you have at least 50 energy. You throw out 3 Catlas. Damage from multiple Catlas do not stack, and you can cast it as a frontal cone or in a 360 fidget spinner like configuration. Modifications include Moxie. Each returning disc that does not hit an enemy grants you energy. Feral, which gains you might for the next turn, but increases the energy cost. 9 lives, which if you use Cataclysm for 2 turns in a row can be used on a 3rd turn for no energy. And Catnip, which grants you haste for the turn. And here's some thoughts and opinions on abilities, catalysts, and general play thoughts. At first, Catlas feels super awkward because it's not a typical point and shoot thing. It's a tad unwieldy, but once you get used to it and the disc mechanics, you can do some really unique things with it you can't do with anybody else, and it becomes a ton of fun. I like Inertia for the extra little bit of burst damage you get, since most aware players will do their best to avoid a return shot. Ambigify I'll typically use to lock down a flighty target. I've seen a lot of players use it as an execute, but then you lose crowd control and ability to tag someone who thinks they won't get chipped, like an L who tumbles away to safety. I prefer to run Frisky. The faster you can ult, the more of a danger you become. Mousetrap. Here, Nev takes a page from Juno and improves upon it. It's just like Juno's Lockdown, and it makes very mobile teams think twice, but since you can hit more than the intended target, you can actually inadvertently pick up a kill if your enemy is careless. Stalker and Feline Good are really my go-to mods for different reasons. Stalker if I'm more in the mood for a singular crowd control lockdown, and Feline Good if I'm playing against a more mobile team, or I'm more focused on getting as much ulting as possible. Acrocat is an interesting dash since you can cover more ground to reposition yourself at the end of a turn. I like to use it early and as often as possible to cover the field with as many discs, as well as keep myself one step ahead of the enemies and anything else they might throw at me. Here, I think it's a dealer's choice in terms of mods. They all feel fairly useful, but honestly, Big Cat kind of felt clunky in my hands. I'm sure a more skilled player can combo those two for some really great plays. I typically will run Catwalk instead to get ahead of the battle, but be careful of traps or displacing yourself. Now, Cataclysm. Unlike other ults that often feel like a massive turning point in a game, Cataclysm feels underwhelming. But don't take that as a bad thing, I'm actually okay with this, because Nev's gameplay, in my opinion, is about continuously doing as much damage as possible than being bursty, and you can't continuously do damage if you don't have Catarangs on the field. 9 lives is interesting and I kind of like it. It's this little bit of a build-up, so it changes Nev slightly. Like I said, it's a bit of a build-up for a 3-turn power spike that makes her really hard to avoid or ignore. But if you pull off 2 ults in a row, most teams are going to assume you're going to go for that 3rd one and it'll try to burn you down fast if you do. I do like the gamble though, and the power spike is quite useful and I like to use as much as possible. For catalysts, I'll run Brain Juice or Re-Energy. Nev's cooldowns are long enough where it can be a problem, and Brain Juice will allow you to keep more distance on the field and keep the cooldowns at a low enough pace. Re-Energy, get your ults faster. Simple as that. Again, most players will assume firepower mean you have to run a critical shot, and while you can use it, I don't think Nev benefits from it as much as other firepowers like Zuki or Nyx. Dashes, I'll run Shift or Fade. They're both pretty straightforward. Fade gives you mind games, and Shift is pretty safe. For a 4-space jump, is pretty safe, helps you put some more distance between yourself and your enemy, or where you want to be and don't be, and you can reposition yourself for return discs. For Blast Catalyst, I think it's again dealer's choice. There's almost always at least one person on your team running a probe, so you don't have to if you don't want to, and that way you can focus on making the most of orb pickups and energize mods with Echo Burst. Unstoppable can be niche useful if you feel like you're running into a ton of CC, and Chrono Surge can help your team as well, as it helps you get more return discs for yourself. Now here's the thing with Nev. I won't get into her design, I don't mind it at all, I don't really care. I know currently the Catlas Reactor base is a little split on it. Whatever, cat girl, no big deal. If you don't like her default skin, her Tron suit's just fine, and probably future suits will be just fine as well. Her voice will bug me, but that's really about it. I really like puns, so I'm kind of cool with it. Tryon's really starting to get more creative with their Freelancer kits, which is really cool and appreciated on my part, so you avoid having too many samey Freelancers in the past and future. Now, like I said, Nev's discs work a little different from past Freelancers. If you play them like a straight shot, they're clunky, they don't really work as well, you can't really be effective with them. But if you throw them with the mindset of an AoE and try to cover as much of an area as possible, they can become super effective, especially when they return. Returning discs will always ignore cover, which opens up new routes and movements. You aren't looking for just an opening, but also an exit to get the second secure hit. Use your discs in that AoE mentality to chip around corners, since most players will often try to hug walls by reflex and get around that, and then when they return, boom, you hit them for more damage. I like to play Nev fairly aggressively with some hit and run guerrilla tactics like Gray or Kita with more agency and more forethought. Stick and move like a boxer to avoid getting pinned down and to make the most of the return discs. I've had some really fun and successful games by flanking and running circles around enemies. You can corral enemies this way, but be mindful not to overextend yourself if you don't have Acro Cat or your Dash Kata up. Being over eager can scratch back. You can use Catastrophe in 2 different ways. As a spread shot from your outside position, or just go fidget spinner. Make sure you spin once or twice for full effect. If you're going to use your 360 approach, make sure you get yourself near the center of the action. At least that's the way I like to do it. You unleash Catastrophe and get out of there as fast as you can to cover as much ground as possible. On the disc's return trip, you can cover a ton of ground, honestly, both ways, and catch a ton of enemies off guard at weird angles. Now with Nev, orb pickups are much more enticing for Nev than other characters, and because of that, you should constantly be on the move with your routes on a way to pick up an orb. Prioritize these orbs thusly. Energize, haste, heal, might. Like I said, plan your movement routes and pick up as many as possible, and because of that, you can actually position. Her constant movement means you can allow yourself to orb block enemies if you know they'll try and retreat to pick one up, or punish them. Throw a disc out over an orb like a nasty trap, either making your enemy take a net loss by picking up the haste and taking damage, or negate a healing orb and take out most of that healing by just taking damage from the discs. And really, that's about most of what I can think of for Nev. If you have any comments or questions or opinions, just let it be known wherever you see this video. I try my best to talk back to people as well as read what they're saying, try to improve the way my videos go for you. So until next time, I'll catch you later. Peace.